The new girl at the Vampire Academy, accidentally bonded with the most feared vampire heir. Now every rival wants her dead. Hey everyone, gather around because I've got a story for you that's absolutely wild. Picture this. A girl who doesn't even know she has vampire blood running through her veins suddenly gets thrown into the most elite vampire academy in existence. And just when she thinks things can't get more complicated, she accidentally bonds with the one vampire everyone fears. Yeah, you heard that right. Accidentally. Let me take you back to where it all started. Serafina Moss had never fit in anywhere. Not at her human high school, not in her quiet town, and definitely not in her own skin. She'd always felt different, like she was waiting for something she couldn't name. So when a letter arrived at her doorstep with a crimson wax seal addressed in silver ink, she thought it was some kind of joke. Serafina Moss, you are hereby summoned to Nighthaven Academy for the Immortal Arts. Her aunt, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, went pale when she saw it. I knew this day would come, she whispered, and that's when Serafina's entire world flipped upside down. Turns out her mother had been a Dampier, half human, half vampire, and Serafina had inherited just enough vampire blood to qualify for Nighthaven. Not enough to need blood to survive, but enough to have abilities she'd never even known about because her aunt had suppressed them with herbs and charms her whole life. 3 days later, Serafina stood before iron gates that seemed to stretch into the clouds, her stomach twisted in knots. Nighthaven Academy looked like something out of a gothic dream or nightmare. Black spires pierced the stormy sky, gargoyles perched on every corner, and the windows glowed with an eerie amber light. She was so out of her depth. The moment she walked through those gates, she felt eyes on her. Hundreds of them. Vampires didn't blink as often as humans, she realized, which made their stares even more unsettling. Pureblood stood in clusters, their skin pale and perfect, their movements unnaturally graceful. They looked at her like she was an insect that had wandered into a palace. Well, a girl with hair like spun silver sneered as Serafina passed. They're letting anyone in these days, aren't they? Serafina kept her head down and kept walking. First rule of survival, don't engage with the predators. She found her way to the headmistress's office, a woman named Madame Vex who had eyes like chips of ice and a smile that never reached them. Miss Moss, she said, looking Serafina up and down. A Dampier? How? Quaint, you'll be in the West Tower, 3rd floor. Classes begin tomorrow at sunset. Do try not to die. Wait, what? But Madame Vex had already dismissed her with a wave of her hand. The West Tower room was actually beautiful, all dark wood and velvet curtains, with a 4-poster bed that looked like it cost more than her aunt's entire house. Serafina was just starting to think maybe this wouldn't be so bad when her roommate arrived. A vampire girl with dark skin and eyes that literally glowed gold burst through the door. Oh, thank darkness, you're not another stuck-up pureblood, she grinned, showing fangs. I'm Zaria Kim. You must be the Dampier everyone's gossiping about. News travels fast, Serafina muttered. Honey, in a school full of vampires with super hearing, there are no secrets here. Zaria flopped onto her bed. Fair warning, the purebloods are going to make your life hell, especially the elites. The elites? Zaria's expression turned serious. The most powerful vampire families send their heirs here. The elites are basically vampire royalty and they run this school. There are 4 of them, but the one you really need to avoid. She lowered her voice. Lucian Ashcroft. That name sent a shiver down Serafina's spine for some reason. Lucian's family has ruled the vampire covens for 3 centuries, Zaria continued. He's the heir to basically a throne. Blonde hair, looks like a fallen angel and has power that could level this entire academy if he wanted. He's also completely ruthless. Last year a girl challenged his authority and she just disappeared. No one's seen her since. Great, fantastic. Serafina was stuck in a school with vampire nobility who could kill her on a whim. Just stay out of his way, Zaria advised. Don't look at him, don't talk to him, don't even breathe in his direction. You'll be fine. Serafina fully intended to follow that advice. She really did. But fate, as it turns out, had other plans. The next evening, Serafina's first class was immortal combat training, because apparently vampire school didn't have normal subjects like math or English. No, here you learned how to fight with supernatural speed and strength. The training hall was enormous, with high ceilings and weapons lining every wall. Students paired off, and Seraphina found herself without a partner until the instructor, a scarred vampire named Professor Thorn, pointed at her. "You with Cassia." A girl with auburn hair and a cruel smile stepped forward. Seraphina recognized her from the courtyard, one of the elites. "This should be entertaining," Cassia purred. It was a massacre. Cassia moved like lightning, and Seraphina, who'd never trained a day in her life, could barely keep up. Within seconds, she was on her back, Cassia's hand at her throat. "Pathetic," Cassia whispered. "You don't belong here, half-breed." Something in Seraphina snapped. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was some dormant vampire instinct, but suddenly power surged through her veins like liquid fire. Her hand shot up, and she shoved Cassia back with a force that surprised them both. Cassia stumbled, shock flashing across her face, and crashed directly into someone who just entered the training hall. The entire room went silent, and I mean you could hear a pin drop. Seraphina looked up and her breath caught. He was tall, with hair like spun gold that fell to his shoulders, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of winter storms, pale grey-blue that seemed to look straight through her. He wore the black uniform of Nighthaven, but on him it looked like a king's robes. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. "Lucian Ashcroft." I'm so sorry," Seraphina stammered, scrambling to her feet. "I didn't mean." Lucian's gaze locked onto hers, and the world seemed to stop. Something passed between them in that moment, something electric and terrifying and completely inexplicable. Seraphina felt it in her chest, in her bones, in her very soul, like an invisible thread had just wrapped around her heart and pulled tight. Lucian's eyes widened just a fraction. "No," he breathed. And then Seraphina felt it, the bond. In vampire society, there was a legend about soul bonds, a connection so rare and powerful that it happened maybe once in a millennium. Two souls, intertwined by fate itself, and once formed it couldn't be broken. Seraphina somehow knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd just bonded with Lucian Ashcroft. From the look of horror on his face, he knew it too. "This isn't possible," Lucian said, his voice low and dangerous. He took a step toward her and every student in the room drew back. "You're human." "Half," Seraphina corrected weakly. His jaw clenched. She could see him fighting the bond that was now singing between them. "Stay away from me," he said, each word like a knife. "If anyone finds out about this." "I didn't do this on purpose," Seraphina shot back, fear turning to anger. "Trust me, bonding with you is the last thing I wanted." For a moment, something like surprise flickered in his eyes. People probably didn't talk back to him often. Then Cassia stepped between them, her expression venomous. "Lucian, what's going on?" "Nothing." Lucian's face went blank, emotionless. "Absolutely nothing." He turned and walked out of the training hall, his footsteps echoing in the silence. But Seraphina could still feel him. The bond thrummed in her chest like a second heartbeat, telling her exactly where he was, what he was feeling. And right now, Lucian Ashcroft was absolutely terrified. Which meant Seraphina should be too. Cassia turned to her, eyes blazing. "What did you do?" "I didn't." "You need to leave this academy," Cassia hissed, "before you get yourself killed." It wasn't a threat, Seraphina realized. It was a warning. By the next evening, everyone knew something had happened between Seraphina and Lucian. The rumor mill was working overtime. Some said she tried to attack him. Others said she tried to seduce him. None of them knew the truth, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Lucian Ashcroft's rivals now saw Seraphina as a weakness, a way to get to him. And in the vampire world, weaknesses were meant to be exploited. Seraphina was walking back to her dorm when they cornered her. 3 pure-blood vampires, their eyes gleaming with hunger and malice. She recognized one of them, Dimitri Corvus, another one of the elites. "The little Dampier who caught Lucian's attention," Dimitri said, circling her like a shark. "We just want to talk." "I'm not interested," Seraphina said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That wasn't a request." Dimitri lunged faster than her eyes could track. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Seraphina clawed at his grip, gasping for air. And then the air itself seemed to explode. Dmitri was ripped away from her and slammed into the stone wall so hard it cracked. Serafina collapsed, coughing, and looked up to see Lucian standing there, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "Touch her again," Lucian said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will end your entire bloodline." Dmitri stared at him in shock. "You're protecting a Dampier, since when do you?" "Leave." The three vampires scattered like leaves in a storm. Lucian turned to Serafina, and for a moment his expression softened. The bond between them pulsed, warm and insistent, then his walls slammed back up. "I didn't do that for you," he said coldly. "I did it because I can't have people thinking I'm weak enough to let my," he struggled with the word, "bondmate get killed." "I didn't ask for your help," Serafina shot back, getting to her feet. "No, you just asked for this bond by being careless and reckless. I didn't even know bonds existed until yesterday." They stood there glaring at each other, both breathing hard, and beneath the anger Serafina could feel his fear, his confusion, his desperate need to protect her even though he didn't want it. The bond worked both ways. "This is going to get you killed," Lucian said finally. "Being connected to me, there are vampires who would do anything to see me fall, and now you're a target." "Then break it," Serafina challenged. "Break the bond." "I can't," the admission seemed to cost him. "Soul bonds can't be broken, not by magic, not by death. He closed his eyes. "We're stuck with each other." Serafina's heart sank. "So what do we do?" Lucian looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and what she saw in his eyes wasn't hatred or disgust, it was resignation. "We survive," he said quietly, "together apparently." "All right, so just to recap for those of you just tuning in, Serafina accidentally bonded with the most dangerous vampire at Nighthaven Academy, and now she's got a target on her back the size of Texas. And the vampire she's bonded to, he's not exactly thrilled about it either. But here's where things get really interesting, because the bond between them, it's about to make everything 1,000 times more complicated." Lucian Ashcroft's rooms were in the North Tower, the section reserved for the elites. Serafina had never been inside before, and she could immediately see why the purebloods acted so superior. The corridors were lined with actual oil paintings that probably cost more than a house, and the air smelled like old money and older magic. "Stay close," Lucian muttered as he led her through the halls, "and don't touch anything." "Why am I here again?" Serafina asked, hurrying to keep up with his long strides. "Because Dmitri isn't going to give up that easily, and your room in the West Tower might as well have a 'Come Kill Me' sign on it." He stopped in front of a heavy oak door carved with ravens. "Until we figure out how to handle this situation, you're staying where I can protect you." "Protect me? You can barely stand to look at me." Lucian's jaw tightened. "What I feel doesn't matter, the bond does. If something happens to you, it happens to me. I'm being practical." But Serafina could feel the lie through the bond. He was worried, actually genuinely worried about her, even if he'd never admit it out loud. The inside of his room was surprisingly normal. Well, normal for a vampire prince. Dark furniture, shelves full of ancient-looking books, a massive bed with black silk sheets. No torture devices or blood fountains or whatever she'd been half expecting. "You'll sleep there," Lucian pointed to a velvet couch. "Don't snore." "I don't snore." "How would you know? You're asleep." Before Serafina could respond, someone knocked on the door. Lucian's expression darkened. "Hide." "What? Now?" Serafina dove behind a bookshelf just as Lucian opened the door. A male voice, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous, drifted through the room. "Lucian, my friend, we need to talk about your new pet." Serafina peeked around the shelf and saw a tall vampire with jet black hair and eyes like emeralds. He radiated power almost as strongly as Lucian. "I don't have a pet, Thaddeus," Lucian said coolly. "Really? Because the whole academy is talking about how you nearly killed Dmitri for touching that Dampier girl." Thaddeus stepped inside uninvited, looking around. "Don't tell me you actually care about the half-breed." "I care about maintaining order. Dmitri was out of line." Thaddeus didn't sound convinced. You know what I think? I think something happened between you two, something significant. His eyes gleamed. The Corvus family is already whispering about a bond. Is it true? Silence heavy and damning. Thaddeus laughed, but there was no humour in it. Oh, this is perfect. Lucian Ashcroft, the cold prince of Nighthaven, bonded to a half-human girl. Your father is going to lose his mind. My father won't find out, Lucian said, and there was a threat in his voice that made Seraphina's blood run cold. Will he, Thaddeus? The two vampires stared at each other, and Seraphina realized she was watching a very dangerous game of power and politics. Finally, Thaddeus smiled. Your secret's safe with me, old friend, for now, but you know how these things work. Secrets have a way of getting out. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Lucian, that girl won't survive a week here. Bond or no bond, the purebloods will tear her apart. The door closed with a soft click. Seraphina emerged from her hiding spot, her heart pounding. Your father doesn't know about the bond. No one can know. Lucian ran a hand through his blonde hair, looking suddenly exhausted. My father, Lord Ashcroft, he's the head of the Vampire Council. He has expectations, plans for my future that involve a strategic marriage to unite the covens. A bond with a Dampier would be. He trailed off. An embarrassment, Seraphina finished bitterly. A complication, Lucian corrected. One that could start a war between the vampire families. The purebloods believe in bloodline purity above all else. To them, you're an abomination, and me being bonded to you. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw genuine fear in his eyes. They'd kill you just to prove a point. Seraphina sank onto the couch. So we're supposed to just hide this, pretend we're not connected. Unless you have a better idea. She didn't, but every instinct in her body was screaming that hiding the bond was like trying to hide the sun. Eventually, everyone would see. The next few days were a special kind of torture. Seraphina attended classes, trying desperately to blend in, while feeling Lucian's presence constantly through the bond. She knew when he was in combat training, focused, controlled. When he was in council meetings, bored, irritated. When he was thinking about her, confused, conflicted, and something warmer he kept trying to suppress. It was invasive and intimate, and absolutely maddening. Meanwhile, the attacks were getting worse. It started small, someone accidentally tripping her down the stairs, her textbooks going missing, food that made her violently ill, but then things escalated. Seraphina was in the library when it happened. She was researching soul bonds, trying to understand what she was dealing with, when the candles suddenly went out. All of them at once. Vampire sight was better in the dark, but Seraphina's half-human eyes struggled. She heard footsteps, multiple sets circling her. Did you really think Lucian cares about you? Cassia's voice echoed from the darkness. You're nothing but a liability, a mistake he's stuck with. Leave me alone, Seraphina said, backing against a bookshelf. Or what, you'll run to your bonded mate. Another voice, a male vampire Seraphina didn't recognize. He's not here to save you now. They were wrong about that. Seraphina felt Lucian through the bond, felt his sudden alarm as he sensed her fear. He was coming, but he was too far away. The vampires attacked in a coordinated strike. Seraphina tried to fight back, tried to channel that power she'd felt before, but there were too many of them. Hands grabbed her, fangs gleamed in the darkness. And then something inside her erupted. Power exploded outward from Seraphina's body like a shockwave, sending the vampires flying. Books tumbled from shelves, windows shattered, and the entire library shook. Seraphina stood in the center of it all, her eyes glowing with an eerie silver light. She had no idea how she'd done it. The library doors slammed open, and Lucian strode in, his own power crackling around him like lightning. He took in the scene, the scattered vampires, the destruction, Seraphina standing there with power still radiating from her skin, and his expression shifted from fury to shock. What are you? He breathed. Seraphina looked down at her hands. The silver light was fading, but she could still feel the power humming beneath her skin. I don't know, she whispered. Cassia pulled herself to her feet, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. She's a weapon, she spat. An abomination. You need to end this, Lucian, before she destroys us all. But Lucian was looking at Seraphina with something like wonder. Through the bond, she felt his emotions, fear, yes, but also fascination, curiosity, and something that might have been pride. Everyone out, Lucian commanded. Now. The vampires fled. When they were alone, Lucian approached Serafina slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. That power, he said quietly, it's not normal, not even for a Dampier. I know, Serafina was shaking. I don't understand what's happening to me. Lucian reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. The bond between them flared at the contact, warm and steady. We need to find out what you are, he said, because if you can do that without training, then your mother was more than just a Dampier. What do you mean? I mean, Lucian said, his storm-grey eyes intense, there's a legend about a bloodline that was supposed to have died out centuries ago. Vampire hunters who were turned into vampires themselves, creating a hybrid line with powers beyond anything purebloods possess. They were called the Silver Crest. Serafina's heart skipped. My mother's maiden name was Crest. Lucian's grip on her hand tightened. Then we have a much bigger problem than I thought. That night, Lucian took Serafina to a place she didn't even know existed, beneath the academy, down ancient stone stairs that spiraled into darkness. They emerged in a vast underground library, its shelves carved directly into the rock. The Forbidden Archives, Lucian explained, lighting candles with a gesture, knowledge the headmistress doesn't want students to find. And you have access. He gave her a dry look. I'm the heir to the vampire throne, I have access to everything. Right, sometimes Serafina forgot just how powerful Lucian actually was. They searched for hours, pulling dusty tomes and ancient scrolls, and finally Lucian found it, a leather-bound book with a silver crescent moon on the cover. The history of the Silvercrest bloodline, he read aloud. His expression grew darker with each page. Serafina, according to this, the Silvercrest weren't just powerful, they were designed to be the natural predators of vampires. They could bond with pure bloods and drain their power, making themselves stronger while making the vampire weaker. Serafina's blood ran cold. Is that what I'm doing to you? I don't know, I don't feel weaker. Lucian looked at her. But if the vampire families find out you're Silvercrest, they won't just want you dead, they'll want you erased from history. Again. Why did they die out? They didn't die out. Lucian's voice was grim. They were hunted to extinction by the vampire covens 300 years ago. Every man, woman and child with Silvercrest blood was killed. The weight of that settled over Serafina like a shroud. Then how did my mother? Someone must have survived, hidden their bloodline. Lucian set the book down. And now that bloodline has resurfaced in you, the bond between us probably activated your dormant powers. So what do we do? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked Serafina completely. He pulled her into his arms. The bond sang between them, and for the first time Lucian didn't fight it. Serafina felt everything he'd been holding back, his fear for her safety, his growing attachment, his frustration with the impossible situation they were in. We keep you alive, he said against her hair, whatever it takes. And Serafina realized that somewhere along the way, Lucian had stopped seeing her as an unwanted bondmate and started seeing her as someone worth protecting. The problem was, the rest of the vampire world still wanted her dead. Okay, everyone, we've reached the final part of this story, and let me tell you, it's about to get intense. Serafina's discovered she's part of a bloodline that was hunted to extinction, Lucian's in way deeper than he ever intended, and the vampire elite are closing in. The question isn't whether there's going to be a fight. The question is whether our girl and her reluctant vampire prince are going to survive it. Let's dive in. News of Serafina's power spread through Nighthaven like wildfire. By the next evening, the entire academy was whispering about the Dampier who'd sent 6 purebloods flying with a single gesture. Some students looked at her with fear, others with calculation. But it was the letter that arrived at breakfast that changed everything. A raven, not a normal bird, but one made of shadows and smoke, landed on the table in front of Lucian, a sealed envelope in its beak. Serafina watched his face go carefully blank as he read it. What is it? She asked quietly. My father, Lucian's voice was devoid of emotion. He's coming to Nighthaven tomorrow night. Serafina's stomach dropped. Does he know about the bond? No, but he's heard rumors about a disturbance at the academy involving me and a Dampier student. He's coming to investigate. Zarya, who'd been sitting across from them, she'd been one of the few students who hadn't abandoned Serafina, cursed under her breath. Lord Ashcroft doesn't investigate, he executes. Thanks for that, Serafina muttered. Lucian stood abruptly. Come with me, both of you. They followed him to an empty classroom where he sealed the door with a spell. We have less than 24 hours to figure out a plan. Once my father arrives, if he discovers the bond. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Can't we just tell him the truth? Serafina asked. Explain that it was an accident. You don't understand. Lucian's eyes flashed. My father has spent centuries maintaining vampire supremacy. The idea that his heir, his son, is bonded to someone with Silvercrest blood specifically designed to kill vampires. He won't see you as a person, Serafina. He'll see you as a threat that needs to be eliminated. Then I'll leave, Serafina said immediately. I'll go back to the human world. If I'm not here, the bond won't matter. The bond doesn't work that way. Lucian's voice was sharp. Distance doesn't break it. You could run to the other side of the world and I'd still feel you, and my father would still hunt you down. So what then? Serafina's frustration boiled over. I'm just supposed to wait here to die. No, Lucian met her eyes and she saw determination there. You're going to fight. Over the next hours, Lucian did something Serafina never expected. He trained her. They went to a private training room, one warded against prying eyes and ears, and Lucian pushed her harder than any instructor ever had. He taught her to channel her Silvercrest power, to control it instead of letting it explode out of her in moments of panic. The Silvercrest were warriors, Lucian explained as she practiced directing energy blasts at targets. Your instincts are in your blood, you just need to access them. It was grueling work. Serafina failed more than she succeeded, but every time she fell, Lucian was there to pull her back up. And through the bond, she could feel his encouragement, his belief that she could do this. Why are you helping me? Serafina asked during a break, both of them breathing hard. Really helping me, I mean. You could just hand me over to your father. Break the bond before it becomes a bigger problem. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. I told you, the bond can't be broken. That's not what I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his blonde hair. When I was young, my father taught me that power was the only thing that mattered, that compassion was weakness, that humans and Dampiers were beneath us. His expression darkened. I believed him for a long time. I did things I'm not proud of, all in the name of maintaining vampire supremacy. What changed? You did. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised Serafina. This bond, I fought it at first, resented you, but he struggled for words. You're brave, reckless and infuriating, but brave. You stood up to Cassia, to Dimitri, to me. And when you unleashed your power in the library, you could have hurt those vampires, killed them even, but you held back. I didn't want to be like them, Serafina said quietly. Exactly, Lucian stepped closer. You're better than any pure blood I've ever known, and if my father can't see that, then maybe it's time someone stood up to him. Serafina's breath caught. Lucian, you can't fight your own father. I can if he tries to hurt what's mine. The words hung in the air between them. What's mine? Not my bondmate or my responsibility. Mine. Before Serafina could respond, the bond between them suddenly flared with heat and intensity. She gasped, and Lucian's eyes widened as he felt it too, the connection deepening, solidifying into something unbreakable. The bond is completing itself, he said, wonder in his voice. When we accept it fully instead of fighting it, it becomes stronger. Is that bad? I don't know, but I do know. Lucian reached out and cupped her face gently. I don't want to fight this anymore, fight us. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate and fierce, 3 days of Denid attraction finally breaking free. Serafina kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands tangling in his golden hair, and the bond between them exploded into brilliant light. Power surged through both of them, Lucian's ancient vampire strength mixing with Serafina's Silvercrest abilities, creating something new, Something unprecedented. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Serafina saw that Lucian's eyes were glowing silver, matching her own. "Well," he said, a bit dazed, "that's new." Lord Ashcroft arrived precisely at midnight, because of course he did. Dramatic entrances seemed to be a vampire specialty. Serafina watched from a tower window as a carriage made of black glass, and drawn by horses that might have been made of smoke, pulled up to the academy gates. The vampire who stepped out was tall and imposing, with blonde hair like Lucian's but streaked with silver, and eyes like chips of ice. He looked like a king, and he looked absolutely merciless. Serafina, Lucian appeared behind her, dressed in formal robes of black and silver. It's time. They decided on a risky strategy: confront Lord Ashcroft directly together, and hope that the completed bond between them would be strong enough to protect them both. It was insane. It would probably get them both killed. But it was the only chance they had. The Great Hall had been set up for Lord Ashcroft's arrival. Every student and professor was in attendance, standing in rigid lines as the vampire lord swept in. His presence was suffocating, his power making the air itself feel heavy. His cold gaze swept the room and landed on Lucian. "My son, I've heard disturbing rumors." "Father," Lucian's voice was steady, but Serafina could feel his tension through the bond. "Let me explain." "Explain why you've been seen with a Dampier." Lord Ashcroft's eyes shifted to Serafina, and she felt like a rabbit being studied by a wolf. "Explain why witnesses claim you've been protecting this creature." "Because she's my bondmate," Lucian said clearly. The hall erupted into chaos. Vampires gasped, whispered, shouted. Madame Vex looked like she might faint, and Lord Ashcroft's expression went absolutely glacial. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "That's not possible. You are betrothed to the daughter of the Corvus family. Your marriage will unite the two most powerful vampire covens. You cannot be bonded to a half-breed." "And yet I am." Lucian stepped forward, placing himself between Serafina and his father. "It wasn't planned, it wasn't wanted, but the bond is real and it's complete. You can't change that." "Then I'll do what I should have done to every Silvercrest 300 years ago." Lord Ashcroft's hand shot out, and shadows erupted from his palm, spearing towards Serafina like spears. Lucian moved faster than thought, his own power rising to block the attack. Father and son stood locked in a battle of wills, magic crackling between them. "Stand aside, Lucian," Lord Ashcroft commanded. "No. She is an abomination. Her very existence is an insult to our kind." "She's my choice," Lucian's power flared brighter. "For once in my life this is my choice, not yours, and I choose her." Something shifted in the bond. Serafina felt Lucian's power flow toward her, and her Silvercrest abilities rose to meet it. But instead of draining him like the legends said, instead of weakening him, their powers merged. Silver and shadow, vampire and Silvercrest becoming one force. Serafina stepped up beside Lucian, their hands clasping together, and the power that exploded from them sent every vampire in the hall to their knees. Even Lord Ashcroft stumbled back, shock replacing his cold fury. "What is this?" he demanded. "Evolution," Serafina said, finding her voice. "The Silvercrest were created to balance vampire power, not destroy it. And the bond between Lucian and me, it doesn't make him weaker, it makes us both stronger." She raised her free hand, and silver light danced across her fingers. "You wanted to kill me because you were afraid of what I represent, but I'm not your enemy, Lord Ashcroft, I never was." "The vampire covens will never accept this," Lord Ashcroft said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "They will see your bond as a betrayal." "Then let them," Lucian's voice rang out strong and clear. "I am the heir to the Ashcroft line, and when I take my place on the council, things are going to change. No more hunting those with mixed blood, no more treating Dampiers as lesser beings. If the covens want to challenge me, they're welcome to try." The power radiating from him and Serafina made it clear that challenging them would be suicide. Lord Ashcroft stared at his son for a long moment. Then, slowly, he inclined his head. It wasn't acceptance, not quite, but it was acknowledgement. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Yes," Lucian agreed, "I have." Lord Ashcroft looked at Seraphina. "If you harm my son—" "I won't," Seraphina said firmly. "The bond won't let me, just like it won't let him harm me." Another long silence. Then Lord Ashcroft turned and swept from the hall, his presence fading like a storm passing. The moment he was gone, Seraphina's knees gave out. Lucian caught her pulling her clothes, and she felt his relief wash through the bond. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Not even close." Lucian's smile was wry. "We just declared a revolution in front of every vampire in this academy. The purebloods are going to make our lives hell. More than they already have." "Fair point." Seraphina looked around the great hall. Some vampires were staring at them with hatred, but others, like Zarya, who was grinning from ear to ear, looked intrigued, hopeful even. "I can't believe we survived that," Seraphina said. Lucian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Get used to surviving the impossible. Something tells me it's going to become a habit for us." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lord Ashcroft left Nighthaven, but news of Lucian's bonding spread through the vampire world like wildfire. Some covens called for his removal as heir. Others, surprisingly, expressed support for a new way of thinking. The academy itself transformed. With Lucian openly protecting Seraphina, the attacks stopped. Some purebloods still sneered and whispered, but none dared to actually harm her. And slowly, other Dampier students started to come forward, emboldened by Seraphina's presence. Cassia, interestingly enough, became a grudging ally. "I still think you're insane," she told Seraphina one evening, "but you've got guts, and Lucian's happier than I've ever seen him." It was true. The bond between Seraphina and Lucian had settled into something warm and steady, a constant presence that felt like coming home. They trained together, studied together, and slowly learned to navigate a relationship that had started with absolutely everything stacked against it. "Do you ever regret it?" Seraphina asked one night as they sat in Lucian's room, her head on his shoulder. "The bond, I mean, everything it cost you." Lucian was quiet for a moment. "I regret that we didn't have a choice in the beginning," he said finally. "But what we have now, this is my choice, you are my choice, and I'd make it again in a heartbeat." Seraphina smiled and tilted her head up to kiss him. "Good, because you're stuck with me." "Funny," Lucian murmured against her lips. "I was about to say the same thing." The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They both knew that. The vampire world was changing, but change never came without resistance. There would be more challenges, more enemies, more battles to fight. But they would face it together. A vampire prince and a Silvercrest girl, bonded by fate and strengthened by choice. And anyone who tried to tear them apart, well, they were welcome to try. 3 months after Lord Ashcroft's visit, Seraphina stood on the balcony of Nighthaven's highest tower, watching the sun set over the academy grounds. She'd grown to love this place despite everything, or maybe because of everything. Lucian appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, his peace. "Madame Vex wants to add a new class to the curriculum," he said. "Silvercrest history. She wants you to help teach it." Seraphina raised her eyebrows. "Me teach? You're the only living Silvercrest any of us have met. Who better?" It was a far cry from when she'd first arrived at Nighthaven, terrified and alone. Now she was being asked to teach, to help shape the future of vampire-dampier relations. "I'll do it," Seraphina said, "on one condition." "What's that?" She turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. "We do this right, not just the bond, not just surviving. We actually build something better here for everyone." Lucian's storm-grey eyes softened. "Together." "Together," Seraphina confirmed. He pulled her close and kissed her as the last rays of sunlight faded and the stars came out. And in that moment, with the bond singing between them and the whole future stretching ahead, Seraphina knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The new girl at the Vampire Academy had found her place. And she was never letting it go. So what did you think? Drop a comment below and let me know if you want more Vampire Academy stories. Join my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Exclusive and uncensored episodes are available only on Patreon. Check the link in the description.